Hello everyone. We were expecting a bit more people tonight, but I think that maybe the traffic is not helping us. But let's start as planned. Maybe the people on the left, if you can come like fill the seat here, that'd be great. So you can see clearer. Yeah, people here. Just come front table or just find a table here. So it's going to be easier to see for you. So welcome to our new session of 7 Peaks Split. Today, let's start with a quick introduction of the company. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Patrick. I'm the head of talent acquisition at 7 Peaks. So I am responsible for all the hiring of our employees across the group. Something that I wanted to say tonight is that we're also happy to see you coming here. We're going to talk about .NET. We're going to have internal speakers, but we have also like special guests coming from Red Hat, Guide. So we're going to talk about Azure SignalR, Podman, and code migration. We're going to have Saeed, senior backend developer here. Guide solution architect at Red Hat, and Jose, our famous head of talent. Of course, like as usual, follow us on our social media, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Follow our new career opportunities, our next event coming. We have something to celebrate as well. So last week we got awarded best place to work. You saw a lot of signs, stickers everywhere. So we're really proud about this. Our people are happy working here. We would like to continue to maintain this best place to work by Workventure. Of course, having fun, party hard, and do a lot of sport. We're doing a lot of sport activities, events, karting, ice skating. Do we say rock climbing or wall climbing, something like this? And we love to celebrate, eating a lot. There's going to be a lot of food afterwards as well, beer if you want. And we're still hiring a lot across the whole department that we have, from design, product, mobile, backend, web, architecture, delivery, people, etc. So feel free to apply or contact us through the email right there. Or if you have anyone who is interested to join 7 Peaks, feel free to share with them. Now, on July 5th, we're going to talk about cloud data technology. So you are also welcome to register. It's going to happen in about a month, same place, here at 7 Peaks. At the end of the show, the speak, the talk, the discussion, the knowledge sharing, feel free to share the feedback to us and get some free pizza from Pizza Mini. Now let me invite the first guest or internal speaker, maybe? Yeah, Saeed, please.
Good evening. Today I'm going to talk about Azure SignalR service and talk about how we can use it, how it works, and how we can scale it in our applications. So I'm Saeed, senior developer in 7pix. I mostly post on LinkedIn, and if you want to follow my post, you can see more data and knowledge there. Here we start with a quick overview for checking the WebSocket and the HTTP, just for a quick reminder how they works. After that, we start with the ASP.NET SignalR, the embed one. Usually most of us use that. And after we talk about the Azure SignalR service and how it works and how does it scale. Okay, so WebSocket and HTTP. So when we are talking about the HTTP, it's all about the request response. So in HTTP environment, always clients needs to send the request to the server, and then server will prepare a response to the clients. So it's always a start from the clients. There is no way to send any data from server to the client in the HTTP. But for the WebSocket, after client and server did the handshake, they actually open a connection, and over that open connection, they can send anything, both server or client. Just for this checking, so as you can see, HTTP is half duplex communication, but WebSocket is full, and in the HTTP, always client start the connection, but WebSocket can be both server and client. And this is the other things. So just for this, for the quick reminder of the WebSocket. So can we easily using the WebSocket in the SignalR in the ASP.NET application? SignalR. Anyone here using the SignalR in the ASP.NET? Yeah? Okay, great. So, in the ASP.NET SignalR, Microsoft introduced the SignalR as an abstraction over the multiple transport layer. To actually, SignalR will take all the responsibility for having a real-time web application. So it first attempts to establish a WebSocket connection, but if client doesn't support the WebSocket, it will use the other transport layers. So let's see another picture of the WebSocket. As you can see, client will request to the server, do the handshake, and then after opening the connection, they can send anything. Bidirectional. So this WebSocket can be disconnected in both sides. So the SignalR, if it detects that client doesn't support the WebSocket, so it tries to use another protocol, another transport called server send event, SSE. And again, clients try to start a connection with the server. And after that, server will send and push the data to the client. As you can see, server send event. Only server can send some data or messages to the clients. At the end, if clients doesn't support the others, it will use the long pooling. So long pooling is basically is like the HTTP. Client requests to the server, but server hold that connection and keep it open until there is something to send to the clients. After clients got the response, the connection will be closed, and then immediately it will request again for opening new connection to get new data. So yeah, this is the SignalR in the ASP.NET. When we are using the ASP.NET SignalR, this is the whole scenario that we are using. So when you are simply adding the SignalR NuGet package, actually you have the HTTP, your REST API, beside the SignalR. So in one place, you have the WebSocket and HTTP, and all the clients deal with the same endpoint of your web application. But you can see the issue, I think. The issue is coupling. Is there any way to decouple the SignalR from your ASP.NET application? So yeah, at this point, Azure SignalR will take care of this decoupling. Actually, this is the main reason for having the Azure SignalR. Yeah, the SignalR is built on top of the ASP.NET SignalR and is designed for large-scale application. As you can see, the whole idea is decoupling, as I said. So this app server is actually, this is your web application, and the Azure SignalR service works like a proxy between your application, your server, and your clients. But always, clients needs to negotiate with your server first. In this area, because clients will call your web application directly, there is no need to negotiate first. But here, we need to negotiate the client to introduce themselves. For example, I say, hi, I want to connect to your WebSocket. So this, the app server or web application will take care of the validating the client, validating the access token, and then respond with the access token for the SignalR and the endpoint of the SignalR. So there is the steps for connecting to SignalR. When you use the SignalR, all clients needs to connect to the Azure SignalR, not your application. But client sends a negotiate request to your application server, and then it will respond with two values: the SignalR endpoint and an access token for connecting to your SignalR. Because SignalR is out of your application, and you need to care about which clients can connect with this access token. And after clients receive the redirect response, it will use that URL to connecting to the SignalR. Okay. So for using the Azure SignalR, there is 3 modes when you are configuring the Azure SignalR inside the Azure portal. First one is, First one is default mode, which is actually if you have a web application, ASP.NET application, using the SignalR, but you want to refactor it and using the Azure SignalR. This one is really compatible with such application, and just for the changing some line of code, you can connect to the SignalR. The second one is the serverless, which today we will go for this mode because it is very interesting. It's fully serverless, working with the Azure functions. So you have the Azure SignalR, and you have multiple Azure functions in the other side, no server. All of these components are serverless, and actually the SignalR service here act like a gateway, like API management in Azure. So it will redirect all these requests to your Azure functions by webhook. You can specify the webhooks for your Azure functions, and after they will respond to the Azure SignalR in two ways. First, they can use the REST API or WebSocket. This is one of the beneficial of the Azure SignalR because it exposes some REST API. So simply you can call that REST API to push some data to all of your clients. No need to connect to the WebSocket. And in case of you have some back office or a panel, then you can push directly something to specific users or clients. Okay, and another one, the classic mode. Actually, this one is Microsoft don't recommend to use this mode because this one was for before we have the serverless and default mode. It will all of the application using the classic mode. But nowadays, with having the serverless and default mode, they recommended to not use the classic. So yeah, this is only for the compatibility. Okay, so how it works with the in serverless mode and with Azure Functions. Okay, so as I said, first, every client, every devices that wants to connect to your Azure SignalR, first they need to make a HTTP call negotiate. So first one, let's say you have a e-commerce web application. So you have some Azure function for handling your WebSocket messages. One for the orders or payment or notification. But also you have one HTTP trigger, Azure functions, for doing these responsibilities, for taking care of the clients. And actually, that negotiate Azure functions will say to the clients, okay, this is the URL that you can connect to my Azure SignalR. So first step is calling the negotiate URL, is an HTTP URL, and then they will get the URL and access token. But how? This negotiate will point to the Azure SignalR. Simply, we put the connection string of your Azure SignalR inside that negotiate, and it will ask to the Azure SignalR to get the valid access token. And then it will redirect to respond to the clients, and client step 3 will redirect to the Azure SignalR. After that, the clients open the WebSocket. It's done, and actually the game is started in this step 4. So think about this: your application is online. You have some orders, payments, notification, and some user trying to order something, or you want to send some notification. So at this point, we have this kind of things. The Azure SignalR will take care of the dispatching these messages to your Azure functions. And also, if there is some other messages to your payment stuff, you can get that messages and take care of this processing the messages. And also, this kind of stuff for dispatching and routing the messages to your Azure functions. Okay, so this is how it works. But let's see what is the another benefits of the Azure SignalR service. When we are using the embed SignalR inside your ASP.NET application. So basically you are using or merging your WebSocket with your ASP.NET. But let's assume that you have that e-commerce web application. And in one night, you want to do a promotion. You want to set some discount, 90% discount for your products, and everyone, and you know that tonight will be a lot of users to your website. Okay, so how you can do it for scaling? You have to scale all of your instances. So it means maybe the main load of the request is on the WebSocket part, but you have to scale all of the instances. It will scale both the ASP.NET and SignalR. And yeah, but what happened in this case with the decoupling of your WebSocket and having this scenario? Maybe you detect that there is a lot of requests for the orders. So simply you can scale the order function only. Or maybe in the case of the notification, you can scale this one. Simple. Yeah? And it will save a lot of cost and save money for your servers, your Azure subscriptions. And maybe in this case, yeah, you can scale the Azure SignalR itself as well. So in this scenario, as you can see, by merging your SignalR, your WebSocket with your HTTP request, they are coupled to each other. And with this one, I think this is really, really good, even for maintenance. Think about this, even for if you want to change something, you can go to the Azure functions, your Azure functions, change something and deploy that, not all of your applications. So this is one of the another benefits of using the Azure SignalR. Okay, so let's talk about this session. So by having the Azure SignalR, all of the clients connected to the Azure SignalR. And actually, you don't need to worry about managing your user connections, worry about some kind of things like the bandwidth. Okay, we have a lot of requests on the WebSocket. That messages will take the bandwidth of even your HTTP REST APIs, and it will use the resources of your instance, your web application. But with the Azure SignalR, it will separate. Actually, it's kind of separation of concerns in your application. And yeah, that's it. This is my presentation. And thank you for your any question?
What kind of application fit for WebSocket?
Yeah, so there is a lot of type of application that we can use for the Azure SignalR, like gaming applications, because they need to stream something between client and server, and or a chatting application, or even for the trading applications. Yeah, all of them it's suited for using Azure SignalR.
So SignalR is abstraction over WebSocket, right? So there is another new method to transfer data on WebRTC. It has a data channel. So does Microsoft plan to abstract WebRTC as well as a part of SignalR, so we can use WebRTC instead of WebSocket to transmit data?
I don't think so. The WebRTC, actually they are using the same things. At the end, they are using the, okay, as a transport, we are using the WebSocket, SSD, and long pooling. But in the WebRTC, they are using the another protocol or another transport. But SignalR keep trying to use this protocol only. But in case of the Internet Explorer, that is going to die soon, they are supporting some other else, but no, WebRTC, I don't think so.
It's not planned.
Okay.
Thank you.
No plan. Because, okay, Azure, they have another service in the cloud called the Azure Communication Service. So if in the Azure environment, actually you don't need to use the WebRTC.
My question was because WebRTC is actually UDP as opposed to TCP. So for some communication method is slightly faster because you don't have those three-way handshake from TCP.
Yeah, so actually WebSocket is based on the TCP. So maybe there is another reason for Microsoft introduced another service, ACS, Azure Communication Service, for dealing with the video calls, voice calls, or yeah.
So my question was because SignalR is an abstraction, right? It can use WebSocket, HTTP request polling. So does Microsoft plan to add WebRTC to that list? So we can either use WebSocket, WebRTC, or polling.
No, my answer is no, and because Microsoft has their own service, you can use the ACS, Azure Communication Service.
Good talk, Saeed. One question: when would you choose SignalR over WebSockets?
Okay, if you want to implement your own WebSocket, you have to care about a lot of complexities. So using the SignalR, it will take care of the client supported WebSocket, because maybe some of the old browsers cannot use the WebSocket, so it will automatically switch to the another transport, SSE or long pooling. But if you have only the WebSocket, first, you don't have another choice. Second, you need to manage all of these transport messages, or because it should be in the binary, you need to decode it. It's a lot of complexity. Personally, I don't go for the implement my WebSocket. Thank you so much.
One, two. Ooh, that's loud. Okay. All right. Give a round of applause to Saeed again. Perfect. Perfect. So, how do I start this? I think I'm getting drunk, but anyway. My name is Guide. Just call me Guide. The topic done it on Podman. Anyway, as you can see from my props over here, I'm from Redhat Thailand. I've been a software engineer for like 3 years, and I have been recently, not very recently, a sales engineer for 4 years as a solution architect, right? So, how many of you have used Docker in your life? Docker file, Docker run. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up, I want to see it. Kubernetes. I see some hand now. Okay, cool. So the premise of this topic, Podman, actually what it is, you can think of it as a Docker alternative. Who have used Podman before? Glad to see that. Glad to see that. Okay, so without further ado, what it is in a gist. Podman is basically a daemon-less container management tool. I'm using the word container management tool because Podman is not a container runtime. However, I will not go into detail what is container, how is it different from VM. If you don't know that, you really have to know that by now. It's 2023 already. So it's daemon-less. Docker needs a Docker daemon to run stuff, right? But Podman doesn't need a Docker daemon. We will go into detail on how is that beneficial for the team later on. Anyway, let me continue on this. It's also open source, the secure. By secure, I mean it doesn't need a root privilege to run or build the container. That's gonna be interesting later on. So anyway, when we talk about Docker, we talk about container, we need a tool to build the container image. Podman is exactly that one. The output is the OCI standard container images. It stands for Open Container Initiative. If I'm not wrong, probably yes. So, which hosts support Podman to run? Well, obviously, in a production environment, you probably want to run your application on a Linux machine. Right? Right. So, but during your development, you want to use your Mac OS, you want to use your Windows, Podman also support that, but it has to be run under the Podman machine, which is basically a VM inside your Mac OS or your WSL. So, easy way to install Podman and try that out. Hopefully, I'm not going too quick over my presentation. Anyway, so for the community, that's one point that I really want to talk about that because I mentioned that Podman is the Docker alternative. But Docker has been around for ages, right? We all know Docker, even though we don't use it, but we have heard of Docker before, right? But Podman is relatively new compared to Docker. So this is just a previous statistic of the Podman GitHub repository. Right now, I think it has around 18,000 stars and a lot of contributors along the way. So check that out if you want to, get deep into the open source contribution and all those stuff. And also, every open source project needs the main contributor, the sponsor, and obviously the sponsor is Red Hat. We are extremely sponsoring this platform, this tool. So, but it's open source, so free to use that. Anyway, this is probably my entire presentation mixed into one page, right? When to use Podman, when to use Docker, and what is the advantage over the others, right? First one, as I mentioned before, Podman is daemon-less, but Docker needs its own daemon to run its stuff, right? And that is like a slight overhead when you have to choose your container tools. Mind you, I haven't seen or I haven't researched any comparison between the performance of a production environment that use Podman over Docker before. But anyway, the truth is, Podman is more lightweight. That's the first point. Secondly, Podman, it interacts directly with the Linux kernel. So if you use Podman in your Linux or Windows, then you're gonna need the Podman machine because those two doesn't support Linux out of the box, right? But if you run it on, Fedora or any Linux distros, then it's basically talk directly with the kernel. But compared to Docker, the Docker needs a daemon to talk to the kernel. So that's another overhead. Thirdly, Podman, as the name suggested, it is built on, on the concept of pods. Who know what pod is? Raise your hand. Nice one, Jojo. A pod is basically a container unit inside the Kubernetes, right? So Podman is built for this purpose. Like it has its own abstraction of pod. You can use Podman yada into Kubernetes very seamlessly and all those stuff. I'll show you later on. And I think probably the most reasonable point that you have to consider Podman is the security. So it basically can run a rootless container. Root privilege. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's say you run your container using the Docker engine, and by default, the Docker engine needs a root privilege to run stuff. Although Docker also supports a rootless configuration as well, but it needs additional things to do. What if the hackers got into your containers and got the root privilege of the containers? That's already some bad. But by default, Podman is a rootless container. So just from this, I'll pause a little bit. Alright? Okay. I'm gonna keep going. Let's see a simple demo. So when I say Podman is basically a Docker alternative, then it should work with .NET, right? We are .NET people. .NET Core, .NET 7. Already .NET 7, I've seen .NET 8 preview already. It's way too fast. Both of them on purpose. Actually, it should probably work. I will prepare a demo for that, but let's see if it's gonna work or not. But normally it doesn't. Alright, so let me get into my VS Code. As you can see, I have a very, very simple MVC.NET application running with .NET 7. Like, it's just so simple. Like, we can just create .NET new MVC app. I'll put this into this. So what you can see from the directory here, I have a simple container file as well. You may be familiar with Docker file, but in the Podman world, we call it container file. Don't ask me why. So it basically serves the same purpose as as a Docker file to specify your container spec basically. What I have in this is I'm getting the base image from the Red Hat registry. So this is called universal base image provided by Red Hat yada yada. But basically it's just .NET 7.0 as my foundation for building this app. And just add the pre-built, the pre-published .NET application into the working directory, right? And then just simply calling the .NET run the DLL command after the container is built. Pretty simple. So let's say I run the application, I built the container already. What I got is this guy. I got the Podman desktop on my Mac OS here. So it's kind of similar to Docker Desktop. Who use Docker Desktop daily? Anyone? Alright. So Podman Desktop also available. But again, it's kind of behind Docker because Docker has been here for almost 10 years or more. So I can see the images that I built. It's a bit small, bear with me, or if you want to just move to the front. I built the image, I can make it a container. I have the container running already from that images, and I can just go into the container from the Podman desktop. Just open the browsers, and boom, site cannot be reached. See? Most of the time it doesn't work. But anyway, if it works, it will probably look something like this. This is .NET MVC simple application, right? So I mentioned something about it being a pod concept of the Podman, right? So if you look very closely, it's kind of small. when I click on this settings button on Podman desktop, I can actually create or generate a Kubernetes YAML straight from that. So a kube YAML is what you want to do to apply to your Kubernetes cluster if you have one. So Podman is very, very keen, and the concept behind the scene is very tight, closely coupled with Kubernetes concept, pod concept. It's not just creating a pod. You can see here the kind of the YAML is pod, but Podman will also support deployments and the other things as well. So
Can you zoom a bit?
zoom a bit.
Not sure if
Shit. Oh, it works.
it works.
It works.
Very good.
Anyway, so here is a kube YAML. It's a kind of pod. There's a lot of different objects in Kubernetes, like pod, deployment, replica set, stand volume, blah blah blah. But most of the time you probably use deployment. But Podman desktop find an easy way for you to create a pod YAML. So you can see, we have the pod, we have the container, we have the image. So if you maybe you use some easy library that create or tools to create your local Kubernetes environment, you can integrate that with Podman and test on your local machine before you push that to your GitOps deployment, let's say Argo CD or whatsoever. So that's pretty convenient for this, right? So got time. Go back to my VS Code. And actually should go back to my presentation. So maybe I just have to restart the container and it's gonna work, but I'm too drunk to do that. So I'm just gonna go on with the presentation. So how to switch to Podman? Really simple. Alias Docker equal Podman. That's very simple, because Podman also have Docker compatibility inside itself, and most of the commands that works on Docker commands probably gonna work on Podman as well. It's a bit scary, but you can try if you want to. So yeah, that's my session. Quite quick, and I think I have a lot of time. A few more minutes left for Q&A. You can ask me anything, like Jose, bring it.
I have two.
Two questions actually. You're out of your own quota.
Okay, I have two questions.
Bring it.
The first one is going to be about the first slide, right? We have the OCI and we have one other container. Can you go back to the first slide so I can point it out? Yes. So we can deploy applications using the OCI containers, right? And the container images. And what do you mean with the container image?
So for container images, it's any container that is not conform or comply to the OCI standard. So when you build container images, there's an OCI standard that you should follow, because it's like the best practice, to put it simple. Yeah, but it also supports a non-OCI compliant image. That's it.
Okay. And my second question is going to be about Docker Compose, right?
Good questions. How have I haven't mentioned that thing? Sheesh. Anyway, ask it.
And so does Podman has Docker Compose equivalent, or because I do understand that with usually what I see, right? I use the Rancher desktop in my day-to-day. So I keep using the Docker CLI, right? But the demo running is the Rancher desktop, right? So I still have all the power of Docker on my side, right? But how I do this with Podman?
Right. First question first. Podman Compose is basically the equivalent of Docker Compose, and the specification to do that, honestly, it looks kind of the same. Like if you know how to write Docker Compose, you probably know how to use Podman Compose.
Kind of the same?
Yeah,
or is
kind of the same, not the same. I would say that because the repository, you can look it up. Podman Compose is a different
Okay.
kind of implementation compared to Docker Compose.
So I imagine that also I will create a different file, like I have
Maybe.
the Docker file,
Maybe.
now I create the container
Container
file,
file,
so probably
yeah,
I will
yeah,
create like
yeah.
container compose and
Exactly.
okay.
Second questions about the Podman desktop. It's just the first version is version 1 basically. So I don't think you could expect any equal features compared to Docker desktop. Nah, it's not gonna be the same. That's another one. More questions, love more questions. You can ask me questions like, what is the best song of Guns N' Roses? I don't mind. And I'll tell you which one is wrong, which one is right.
Another question?
Small question. Let's wanted to know. Okay, currently .NET after .NET 7, there is a built-in for generating the Docker images or so. Is there any difference between the that images with the images generated by the Podman? I mean,
Question.
I mean, we can use that images inside the Podman.
Good questions. At the end of the day, I think it depends on the base image that you choose to define in the container file or Docker file. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same.
Cool. So the base image should be the downloaded from the Red Hat as the
If you choose Red Hat registry, it's gonna be based on a Red Hat image. If you choose Docker Hub, it's gonna be Docker Hub. Depend on your preference, like whatever works. I think the default for .NET is probably from the Microsoft Container Registry MCR. I think, yeah. So that's the difference. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hello guys, good talk. I have a question regarding SEI Linux. Sometimes when I use Podman, and especially when I mount volumes, sometimes I get into trouble with SI Linux. So do you have any tips or recommendations?
SE Linux, right? SE Linux.
Yes.
Do you have the Red Hat subscription back behind that? Or are you like using pure open source?
Open source.
Pure open source. Then the community is the only way forward. To answer your questions, it's it's quite open. But you can give me later on like what kind of problem are you facing offline. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
I have one other question on top of that. SE Linux would be like OpenSUSE? SE Linux that you are referring to is the SUSE, OpenSUSE?
Fedora is the correct, but SUSE is wrong. That's screwy with you.
I don't know where you came from, but usually only like Red Hat or Fedora for security. Sometimes you have to do some extra configurations to manage the files.
But you mentioned SE Linux.
So
SE
SE Secure Linux.
Okay.
Secure Linux. Yeah.
Things that with the mic, right?
Do I still got your time or like Jose, you good?
I have one question. Is
Okay.
more for the audience, people that are here, right? So last year, Docker changed the subscription model, right? So probably, and your company, depending of the size and revenue, have to change from Docker to other alternatives, right? We have Podman, Rancher Container, and
Don't say Rancher.
we have some other alternatives. You can go full Kubernetes, like in this case. What are the alternatives that people here you are using? Like I know one person here is using Podman also.
Yeah.
I'm using Rancher.
Not Ranchers!
I'm going to try Podman. I can promise you, I can try Podman. But what you guys are using?
FYI, for anyone that didn't use Podman like commercial version, right? I mean not Podman, but Docker commercial, Docker enterprise. If your company have a certain reach a certain limit of the revenue, then Docker gonna charge you for that, and so you cannot keep using it for free. Right.
Docker desktop, I believe. The desktop.
Right.
The CLI is
So there's a lot of alternatives. Like me for once, obviously I use Podman to do presentation and all. But Linux is an open world. There's a lot of possibility in this world. So just use whatever you need to use, like cheaper. Red Hat is not so cheap. It's better. It's just better. You get what you pay for.
to pay.
If you pay, exactly. Any questions, or they should let you guys go for pizzas instead? Alright, so answer to my own question, the best song of Guns N' Roses is Welcome to the Jungle. Thank you.
Oh boy. Thank you very much. Guys, hello. 1, 2, 3. .NET better than Java? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Can I
see my head lah.
Can I hit it?
You can have it for yourself.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to. Right.
I put him in the glass.
That boy.
So welcome everyone, my name is Jose, I work for Redhat, and now I'm going to tell you why you should be running your EF4 migration on Red Hat Linux. If you pay for it, you are going to get a very good service.
Hey, Jose.
Very interesting.
That's okay, can I start? Got some technical problem. But welcome everyone. And thank you very much for you to be here. Right? I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. Right? I know that there are some pizza waiting for us. Right? So my talk today is going to be about EF core migration bundles. Right? So I hope that in this half hour I can go over to describe for you what is a migration, how you should be running a proper migration, right? And when you go to deploy your migration, what are the alternatives that you can use to deploy your migration in production, right? And how migration bundles can help you on that, right? Migration bundles is a new feature on .NET 7, I believe. .NET 7 or 6. .NET 6 introduced a migration bundle that is basically a way for you to build your migration in a executable, right? So I believe that many of you have run database migrations before. So let's take a look at how the migration bundles can help you to achieve a successful production migration, right? So what we are going to be taking a look in today, right? So we are going to start with a common user case, right? Some day-to-day activities that many of you have to perform, right? That is basically you have to implement a new requirement. Right? We are going to take a look in the concepts about evolutionary database design, right? How we do CI/CD, how we do continuous deployment with a database, how we change the database, right? So, and we like to start our project is small and with the minimum as possible to get started with it, and we involve our code base over the time, right? So migrations allow us to do the same with the database. And we are going to see why this is important and why is that, right? Why is evolutionary database design, right? It's just a fancy name for something that we have been doing for quite a while, right? And we are going to take a look from what is a good migration process, and how can I involve my database in a safe way. And we're going to see how I can implement all these and deploy using Entity Framework. Okay. So let's start from the application that we are developing and from the basic principle, right? So all of the experience, all of the user cases here, right, is from a real life experience, right? This is a real project, but I had to do some replacements and change for something, and that don't tell you exactly what application is, because we have some NDAs in the contract, right? There are some confidential information, right? So I'm using some real life experience, right? But I cannot show you the real example because contract. So I'm using a fake example, a fake exercise basically that we are building, for example, UI for SpaceX, right? So imagine you are an engineer, in SpaceX, right? And you have to develop a new requirement, right? So Elon Musk arrived to you and say, look, we have our admin dashboard for our rocket, right? And I would like to see a small description of each rocket, right? So this is a feature that we need to develop. This is the new requirement. I would like to add a description, a small description for each rocket, right? That is not currently developed yet, right? So we need to add that. If I'm the developer implementing that, right? So probably this will be some of the steps that I'm going to go over, right? So I would like to scope the requirement, right? Basically get a list of all the steps that I would like to do on that, right? But if I'm the one implementing this, right? In this case, we have Jan. Jan implemented this requirement, right? And this requirement basically states, right, that we have a list. We have a list of 13 different rockets, right? There are 13 of them with different images, height, and with different boosters, and also total mass, right? And all this information. And now we would like to add the description, right? So Jen open the database, open the C# files, and she sees that in our database, we have a table to keep information around of our rockets, right? But there is no column or there is no property in our model to map the description of the rocket to a table in the database, okay? So these are some of the steps that Jan will need to pass when she's building and creating these requirements, right? So from the development machine and to production, right? Some of the steps that Jen will go to deliver this, right? So first step, add the description field in the rocket model, right? So we have a rocket model with the height, width, with the weight, with the boosters, right? And now I add the one property there, call it description, right? It's a string, right? And after that, right, what Jan probably will be doing, and she will create a model configuration if these don't exist yet, right? Or if it already exists, she probably is going to tune this model configuration just to add some probably limitations for this description, like minimum size, maximum size, length in this case, right? Max length, minimum length, right? Let's suppose it's a 1024 limit, right? So some of these configurations, so she's going to run some command. She's going to run some commands to generate the migration script, right? So if I'm using an entity framework, probably it's going to be something like .NET EF migration add, right, with the name of the migration. If I'm using probably DBUP or some other tools, you are probably end up relying to write the migrations by hand. Or let's suppose if you are using Fluent Migrator, for example, you are going to write the migration as well, right? So the next step is going to be modify, we write the migration, we probably modify the migration to maybe add some index or some triggers or some other view, right? If you have any view dealing with the and with our Rocket model or Rocket table. Then after that, I finish the migration, I finish my configuration, right? The table is already in my database, so probably now I will change my application to use the new code, right? So I will be changing from my repository, I will get this description, I will pass probably for my view models, right? And I will render in my API. The front end is going to use this property to display in the UI. So all good so far, right? And I'm changing the application to use the new description. I'm going to commit everything, right? I'm going to push to the version control. The CI is going to run, right? The CI server is going to run. In my CI, right, I have one step that is going to apply my migrations in some sort of integration and database, right, where my integration tests are going to run over that, right? If everything works fine, I promote this to my production, right? So I'm going to have some artifacts on my on the end of this CI, right? Probably is going to be, if I'm using Docker container, you are going to have one container. And depending the way that you are delivering your migration, you probably are going to have a script file, right? But today we are going to be using migration bundles, right? So basically, how I would implement that? I will have two containers, two executables, right? One with the application, the second one with the migration bundle, right? So when I publish the artifacts here, when I publish the artifacts, I will have two executables. When my cd, my deploy runs, I'm going to just simply run my migrations, and I'm going to update my version of the container, starting the new container, right? If all this goes well, right, probably I'm going to have some of the files more or less like that, right? So this is my original migration. This is where I create my Rocket table, right? It's an old migration that John don't need to run, right? So here is basically for you to see more or less what is the body and how a migration in framework core looks like, right? So we have here basically the up method that is going to be running when the migration perform, right? So we have the table. We are creating a table, Rocket, right, with ID, name, weight, width, automate, and number of boosters, right? But we don't have the description, and so we have one new migration to add the description on my Rocket, right? A way simpler migration, I'm basically adding a new column, right, to my table Rockets, called description. These are type text, right? I'm accepting nullable so far, right? So all this, in the moment that I deploy, everything goes well, and this is the results, right? Everything worked as expected. My Rocket has no problem, right? And now I can see the description of my Rocket here. Okay. So all of this process that I just described for you is called evolutionary database design. Okay. If you don't know this name, so congratulations. You all probably someday in your career, you practice evolutionary database design. Okay, it's basically the core principle of the migration. All the migration system, right, is based on the principle of you involve your database over the time, right? So this is the principle that you really need to know, right? Migrations are just a tool to implement this principle. Okay. And why? Why this is important, right? Why they evolve your database over the time is important, right? So if you know Martin Fowler, and if you know a book called Refactory, right? Now I would like to introduce you a new book called Refactory refactoring database, right? It's basically implement some of the refactoring techniques that we see in our day-to-day. For example, extract method, moving methods to a base class, or create interface, create abstractions, right? Some of the techniques to refactor apply to database. So there are some techniques specifics for that. For example, if you want to concatenate columns, if you want to split different columns, right? Or if you want to migrate data from one table to other, if you want to split tables, right? These are very well-known problems, and there are patterns, right, to solve these kind of problems, right? Few of these patterns are described in this book, Refactoring Database. I didn't know about this book until I started preparing this presentation, so I didn't read it yet. I read the refactoring, but for code, right? So here I'm basically tell you some of the things that I saw in the internet talking about this book. My impression, very good. If you are a data person, right? If you use it to work as a developer, talking and building the data layer, right? Maybe something very interesting for you, right? But migrations are basically, they are all about evolutionary database design, right? That are basically a way for you to try to work and evolve your database over time. And believe me, it's really not an easy task to do, right? Doing migrations when you don't have data, or doing migration in local development or staging, is a completely different story when you have to bring this to production. The level of risks and the problems that you may face are way bigger when we are talking about production, right? Many developers will say that, okay, programming is easy. The hard is keep our data consistent, right? So what we need to implement, or what we need to do, right, to have evolutionary database design. Okay. So let me talk about some of the common tools, common principles that your migration framework needs to support. Okay. So the first one is database versioning. Okay. It means that basically you would like to know which one of these migrations you applied or you did not apply it, right? So if I have a new migration and I apply that, I would like to have somehow keep track that I applied that migration. This is very important. Each migration is going to change something in the database, right? So they need to be applied in sequence, and they need to be applied only one time. So it's very common that a migration framework is going to keep a version table, right? In any framework, at least we call it migration history, right? With all the migrations that are applied or not. Any time you can go to the database, you can do a select top one from migration, order by name or date. You are going to see the last migration that was applied. Okay. Second thing is schema versioning. Okay. So migration and changes in the database, they are artifacts that belong to that project or that program. So as all the code artifacts, I would recommend, or you should, right, is a good practice to keep them committed in the source control, right? So for each migration that you have, you are going to have a piece of code, independently if it's a SQL code or if it's a C# code, mostly dealing with that migration, right? You are going also to, you would prefer, right, if that migration framework is persistence ignorant, right? What that means? It basically means that you would like to have some abstraction on your SQL, right? If you could, that, or if you are writing SQL, you're writing a SQL in a way that you can reuse across multiple databases, right? I would say that the parts of the persistence ignorance, I would say that is one of the less relevant between the 6 topics, because I don't see people moving database so frequently, right? There is always that story that say like, oh, let's use a ORM, because if someday I want to move a database, it's going to be easier. But I never had to do that in my career in almost 15 years. If you have to do any, I would say, change the database, I will be really interested to listening a bit for you and what are the challenges that you had on that. Right? Other common, three other common tools or specifications or features that you would expect, right? Repeatability, consistency, and idempotency, right? Repeatability. You want to run the migrations over and over again, right? In my machine, in your machine, in your machine, in dev machine, in test, in pre-production, in staging, in any other environment that you want, and product. And the result needs to be exactly the same. If you run one migration in my database and you run in your database, at the end of the migration, both databases need to have the exactly same result, right? Consistency. So usually you would like to have consistency in your migrations. Could be in the naming of how you name your migrations, could be consistency in the ways that you generated this migration, or it can be consistency in the tools that you are using to generate this migration. But this is very important. If you started with anti-framework core migrations, keep consistent with that. Don't change in the middle of the migration to another framework, let's suppose Fluent migration, or don't start writing this in SQL in the middle of the migration, right? Keep consistent with the tool. So Jose, I can never change the migration framework. You can. It's not what I'm saying. You can change the migration framework, but please squash all your migrations, right? And change all your migrations to the new framework. There is absolutely no reason for you to keep running two frameworks for migration just because half of your migrations are in framework A, another half in framework B. Okay, in the potential, basically you want that all your, if you run the migration 2 times, right, should be okay, right? The first time the migration do the job, in the second time it should change nothing in that case, right? You usually prefer that than have an exception or an error, okay? Now that we know the why, right? Why I would do a database incremental changes, right? Let's see the how. How can I implement that? What are the tools that I have available for that, right? So in the .NET world, you are going to have mostly 4 options, right? This is not an extensive list of options. There are many other options here. I'm not including anything from any Hibernate ecosystem in here, okay? So here are some of the options, right? Flame Migrator. Who here ever used Flame Migrator? Anyone ever used it? Flame Migrator? No? Okay, years ago, anti-framework, the classic anti-framework was not the best ORM of the .NET ecosystem. In my opinion, Hibernate was way more developed than anti-framework. Right? In the old ways, right, I would suggest you to use Flame Migrator, independently if I'm using Hibernate or if I'm using EF Classic, right? But back on that time, Flame Migrator will be a bit better than the classic migrations, right? This is one of the first, Flame Migrator is one of the first migrations framework for .NET, and is heavily inspired by Ruby on Rails migrations, okay? The second option that we are going to have is going to be the classic anti-framework migration, right? It's the first official part of migration, it's the first official framework, and for the .NET platform, right? So with the new anti-framework core, we have a completely rewrite. of the EF, right? And then you have now the anti-framework core migrations, right? And there is one other tool that is really, really nice. I really recommend this one, right? It's called DBUp. It's a lightweight migration runner, right? That basically can communicate with any database and works on the principle that you write the SQL, you write the SQL files, describe your migrations, right? And basically DBUp is going to run your migrations, right? So nowadays, my pick is going to be anti-framework core migrations or DBUp, okay? This talk of today, we are going to talk about the anti-framework bundles, right? So we are here. Basically, one of the ways for me to deploy these migrations in an easy way and in a DevOps-friendly way, okay? If I don't have the bundles, right, what it means that we are talking 1 year ago, 2 years ago, okay, because .NET 7 was launched 2022, so 2021 was .NET 6. So until 2021, we don't have migration bundles. So DBUp is going to be my recommended way. Now with the bundles, I say like okay-ish. In the project that I had, in the project that I did, right, we had some problems with the migration bundles, but I still think that it's a very good tool. I just need to try again, right? So for the next project, probably I will be picking migration bundles again, right? I'm going to talk some of the problems that I had with the migration bundles, right? So why I'm picking right now migration bundles instead of DBUp, right? So is very CI friendly, right? What means that you can easily integrate with your CI/CD process, right? So you don't need to have manual or extra steps to do that, right? I remember that on the time of the classic anti-framework, this step here was not that easy. Anti-framework was not that friendly to run migrations on the CI, right? So the second thing, if you're using migration, you are basically using also code-first approach, right? Because if you are using database-first approach, you don't have the need of migration because you are going to generate your code from the database, so you have nothing to migrate, right? But you are going to have problems to keep your code and your models compatible, right? So you are going to have to write probably a data layer, or you are going to need to face different compilation errors when you involve your code. I also don't recommend going database first. My pick is going to be always code first. Okay. And one other very, very interesting that anti-framework core allow you to do, right? We have different ways to publish and deploy your migrations, right? So you have, I believe, 3 or 4 options with anti-framework and to run your migrations, right? And these options is going to be, for example, you can get the SQL scripts, you can build a executable, right? Or you can build a bundle, or you can build a migrator app for that, right? We also have APIs that anti-framework give you to run the migrations, right? That is something that we do in local machine or we do in test and dev environment, but I really, really don't recommend you doing that in production, right? And anti-framework is now cross-platform, right? So I can get my migrations in one platform running another, right? So I work in my day-to-day with a Windows machine, but I usually deploy containers, right? So it's quite practical having this, have anti-framework allow me to do that, and also for me to run and test in my local machine is quite nice. So, independently, the way that you are deploying your migrations, or if your migration is generated by code or etc., there is one thing very, very important, right? And now we are going to talk about some mistakes that avoiding some of these tips lead my project to failure. So customize your migration code and always review the generated code, okay? Sometimes they are generated code, for example. Swagger specifications, right? That are basically ephemeral code, right? Well, what I mean with that is code that you don't touch, right? So if you are consuming an API, you can generate the C# class, C# data models from the API spec, right? So what I will do, I will generate my clients, right, from the spec and don't touch that code. With migrations, migration is also going to be generated for you. But these migrations, after being generated, you need to review and you need to customize that, okay? So let's now talk about some of the problems that avoiding this customization or avoiding review the migrations can make you face it, right? So some of the problems that if you don't review your migration, what can happen, right? So the first problem, right? Naming your migrations in a clear way, in a very objective way, right? What do I mean with that, right? So we had a problem. We had a problem. So here we are having, we have the spaceship migration, right? And as you can see, we have the spaceship V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, blah, 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 blah. And then you have V14, 13, and we finish with the V18, okay? And I didn't copy all of them here, right? But imagine you, now you have to find a bug, in the migration. So what do? Right? You open all of them, right? And you are going to look one migration per time to see what each one of these migrations are doing, right? And then you are going to probably talk with your friend or talk with your tech lead or your PM, and you are going to say, look, I don't know where the bug is, but I know that it's between the migration V12 and V14, right? It's the only thing you can do. So try to put a nice name in your migration, right? Don't put in version like that. Right? One other thing, also don't add space in your migration name. Okay? This is gonna work, but if you want to refer to migration, you are going to need to use the full name of the migration, including the space. Okay? And sometimes working the terminal, a space can lead you to some mistakes. Okay? One other thing also, even that these second names here are better than the first one, right? And try to avoid the snake case or the hyphens in the name of the migration. Right? The reason of that is going to work properly, is easy to type in the UI, to define and etc. But these migrations is going to be converted to C# classes, right? So if you create a migration with this name, you are going to have a class called add user table, all lowercase, and the first thing your Visual Studio is going to do is going to put a warning on the bottom of that, because this is not a proper name for C# class. So I will recommend you to go with migrations like that, like add space engine. Okay. So in case your migration fails, right, or if in case you ignore some of this problem, maybe some of this could happen. Right? So other tips that I would like to give to you, right? When you build your migrations, right, you must, right, always check your migration, the migration that is built, right? Anti-framework, there are some operations that anti-framework is not smart enough to detect. For example, if you rename a property in your model, right, anti-framework can't know that is a rename. What anti-framework is going to do is going to delete your first column and is going to create a new column, right? If it was just a rename that we intended to, right, you just lost all the data that you have in this table, right, in this column, because they drop. You just want to rename. So check that, right, and you are going to see few of these quite frequently, to be honest, right? If you are renaming or if you are building your model, right, you are going to constantly need to check your migrations and replace drops by renames. Okay. One other thing, right? Sometimes you need to add a raw SQL. Okay, so it's one thing that looks a bit, I would say, not conventional, right? But it's something that I say is quite useful. If you need to do any data migration, right? Basically, like, you know, when you add a new column and then your new user starts using that column, but all the old data, you have empty values for that, right? What I will recommend you to do, you can write a SQL, right, in your migration that is going to update some of the values, right? And sometimes you have to rely on this to do is actually one other thing that is basically changing the objects, right? There are some times that you have objects that anti-frameworks is not aware of, right? What are these objects basically? Let's suppose you have collections that you have to change, right? Let's suppose you have store procedures that you want to create, delete, or modify. Let's suppose you have full text search, right? Or you have graphical capabilities or geospatial capabilities that you want to enable in your database, right? Usually you are going to go to the database, run a command there, right? You can use migrations to do that. One other thing that you can do with migration is also seeding data, right? This is a very smart use of the migrations, I would say. You know that database, like for example, country, that is basically a CSV that has like 200 values and that will not change, right? Or for example, in Thailand, province, right? You have a table of province, or you have, for example, products category, right? There is like nine products that don't change. Thank you. So, and in the moment that you have your migrations, right? The last thing that you need to do now is deploy your migration, right? So, as I mentioned, you have two ways to deploy that, right? You can use your CI, your build server, to run your migration against the DB, right? Or you can have your app run your migrations against your DB, right? The left side works quite nice in our local machine, dev environment, okay? This one, quite nice for production environment, and if you want to handle different how to say, if you have a very established process with CI/CD, right? I see like this kind of the way to go, right? So now you have your migrations. You want to deploy these migrations, right? So you are going to have few options to deploy these migrations. The recommended one, and that I'm picking nowadays, is going to be bundles, right? It's basically you just run your .NET EF bundle, right? And what this is gonna build? This is going to build a executable with the migrations. Basically, would be like, it's not exactly the same, but will be some sort of console app, right? That is going to run your migration, right? And have a command line app is also a very, very nice approach. To be honest, today, if I have to run these migrations, I'm going to use the bundles with a command line app. Okay? And the main reason for that, right, in the moment that you generate a migration bundle, it's going to work very nice if you don't have anything else in your database. Sorry, if you don't have anything else in your configuration file, right? If you start the project today, works nice. In the next moment that you are going to start adding, for example, secrets manager, that you are going to set, and Google API keys here, Google API keys there, right? Migration bundles is not going to be enough for you, right? You are going to start to have some errors, right? That you can solve it with you create the bundle, okay, but you also create an app, right? An app that only contains the bootstrap of your EF context, and use the bundle and the migration app together, right? So it's basically a combination of these two here. Or you can do also a combination of console app, right, with the content script, basically, right? Or you can use DB-up in this case, right? But looking the code, right, if you want to run the migrations bundle, the command is as simple as this, right? .NET EF migrations bundle, and this is the problem that I mentioned, right? It's going to ask for your app settings, right? So in the moment that you generate the bundle, you need to point what is the startup project, right? If you point to your web project, you are going to have some problems. So you can create a different app for that, right? So some of the best practices, right? Use your CI/CD, and you can have your. In my case, right? My application was a container, right? The bundle was another small container application, so I have 2 containers, and I basically, when I release, right, I run the migration container in one time, right? And I run for my app, right? I run the new container that I built for the web app, right? So, and 2 Docker containers, quite interesting, quite nice, right? In a CI/CD environment, right, you can pick scripts or the bundle, right? So here are some examples with both of them. So you have the EF tool, and then you basically create your script as easy as run .NET EF migration script, right? You are going to have a script file, and after that you can just run your script. Right? This is quite acceptable, quite okay to do. Right, so here I'm using Azure DevOps. Right, it's quite handy. You can just go to the UI and configure that, but you can do everything in any other CI, and it's basically running a simple command. Right? So in the case if you have your migration bundles, right, you follow the same step, but instead of generating the script, you are going to generate a bundle. This is going to give you an executable. After that, you just execute the bundles. Right. And for this presentation, I use mostly 2 main references for that, right? And I would like to share with you, and I really recommend. One is Bob Johnson, right? Which is a GitHub project where they get the majority of the information in comparison from the different ways to do in .NET, right? And the second one is going to be a post from Martin Fowler. If you go to martinfowler.com, it's basically describing the evolutionary database design. And I finish here. Thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Oh man.
I left you hanging, man.
This one, please.
Easy one.
This one.
What's the best song of Guns N' Roses?
For me or for you?
For you, it.
For me?
One.
Welcome to the jungle.
Good question. Good answers.
Is a
Anyway,
switch child of mine.
Switch I don't mind. That's
Is
the
also
mystery.
good.
Um,
Next question.
Normally the database migration doesn't happen very often, right?
Wait.
You got my questions?
What database migration you are telling? If it's like, oh, I have a Postgres, I'm going to migrate
No,
to
not that.
SQL?
But schema change in context of relational database and all those stuff. Like
Being honest, depending of the phase of your project. If your project is in development phase, it's going to happen quite fast, right? And quite mostly every feature that you are going to do, you are going to be creating tables, you are going to be creating new things that don't exist yet. So in the beginning, yes, it's going to happen very fast, very frequently. If you have established products where you have like basically a maintenance phase, So it's quite infrequent that's going to happen, but it's still gonna happen.
Okay, cool, thank you. That's my field of question. Anyway.
Thank you, Jose. Actually, my question is not maybe related to this concept,
So
but it's about
it.
using the migration during the CI or CD. I just want to know your opinion about the running or using the CI CD with the migration. So mostly in your images as well, we are running the migration before we deploy the API, the project, whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there is two approach. So first, we run the migration before we deploy the API, or first deploy the API and then apply the migrations. So this is the first question. And second, what happens if migration fails? For any reason, I don't know.
Okay, quite good. So first question, should I apply migrations? Should I migrate, then deploy, or should I deploy, then migrate?
Yes.
Right? My honest opinion, whatever. You can pick one of both, right? Both are going to give you errors. Okay? In the moment if you migrate, depending on the migration, if you migrate, the first few seconds you are going to have some errors, right? If you decided to deploy first and then migrate, you are going to have also and some of the errors. There is no really a scenario that you can win. Right? My pick, what I prefer usually, migrate first. Okay, you first migrate and then you deploy it. Why? It's actually because the second question. Your second question is, if the migration fails, what happened? Right? So, why I would pick deploy the migration first? Right? If the migration failed, right, it means that basically my database is in the same state, right? So I expect that the migration usually runs in a transaction. If that fails, everything is going to roll back. So my database is in a clean state, right? So I have some time to go there, check why that migration failed. Okay. And if I deploy the application first, right, now I have to do a rollback of the application. It's way harder for me to pass the migration step. Right? So I run the migration step first. After that, I will deploy the application. Both are going to have pros and cons. Okay, you are going to have some downtime. To be honest, it's possible for you to run migrations with zero downtime in the database. Okay, but there is an entire engineering process only focusing on that, right? And it's going to be cost for you, and I'm not sure if it's worth to implement depending on your project life cycle. But there are tools and there are engineering practices that I can do to solve a migration.
Yeah.
A migration without time.
Yeah, but honestly, I haven't seen any solution for. Okay, I agree that first run the migration and then deploy the API. But what happened if, for example, you have the breaking change for your database? For example, you have a nullable column, but you made it required, something like that. You apply the migrations, but the deployment of the API failed. So what happened? You cannot roll back to your old version because of that column, all the APIs will be failed because they are sending the null values. So I haven't seen any solution for rollbacking the migrations. Right. I'm not sure. Is it a good practice for having such this a step of, okay, if there's anything's failed, we need to roll back to the other, we need to keep the database consistent based on the data.
So each migration is going to have the up, right, that is going to be executed when you migrate to a new version, and each migration is going to have the down version, right, that is going to be a bit below here. So you can migrate and you can also roll back, okay? And I never, being be honest with you guys, I never had to do a rollback on migration, okay? What I usually do, right, if I have any problem, I write a new migration that fix the problem of the older migration. So I will only move forward with the migrations, right? And in the case of if errors happens and if you have anything that really critical on that, right? Well, my question for you is going to be, did you do a backup for your database? No. So, yeah, kind of.
What is the disaster recovery?
What's the disaster recovery plan? But being honest with if your migration pairs with problems from dev, SIT, and staging, right, and you catch this in prod, and your process is broken, it's not migration that is the problem. Your process needs to be fixed, right? These errors should be catching Lower's environment. And you have unit tests, integration tests that can ensure this, okay? And yeah, basically that. And again, our deployment always going to have some risks. When you have migration, it's going to be a bit more riskier, okay? But usually, I believe few times the migration fail. Okay? Few times migration is gonna fail. I believe in my career, I believe I had this 2 or 3 times that failed in production, right? And usually the problem was because replication of the SQL Server. And usually is that. You're good. Wow. Sorry, not finishing that. So, I would like to open an invitation for you, right? Call your husband, wife, kids, sister, brother, right? And next month we are going to have our cloud meetup, right? So we have Georgia and Suhas from internal 7pix speakers. We are looking for 1 external speakers, right? So the idea is to have something related with cloud and data technology, right? So if you like data, if you are interested to learn more how to handle migration scenarios, how cloud people can work with developers to make this a successful, right? This probably is a good meetup for you, right? So put your calendar in more or less 1 month, right? 5 July, 18 p.m., right? Come here, take a coffee with us, a beer, eat some pizza, and learn how to do cloud data technologies with Georgia and Suhas. I also would like to say that I'm selling clothes on Shopee, so if you can search me. And yeah, please feel also the feedback, right? It's going to be very useful for us. And now, Shen.
So yeah, please give us the feedback. So our staff there will ask you if you already feel the feedback or not, because we love to have the feedback to make the meetup better. So thank you guys for coming tonight and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, I will stop Podman after today, right?